This week, Ghana received a small group of West Africans, 14 people to be precise, including several Nigerians and a Gambian, who were flown in from the United States after Washington started sending migrants to third countries. Now, President John Mahama said Ghana agreed to accept West African nationals and that officials helped those people continue on to their countries of origin, pointing out that ECOWAS allows free movement across the region. Now, the move fits a broader U.S. policy of expanding deportations to third countries, a practice that some say can leave people stranded in places where they have no ties or legal protections. It also sends or lands at a sensitive moment for Ghana. Remember, there have been anti-migrant protests this summer and growing tensions in relations with Washington, which helps explain why the decision is drawing close attention. Now, joining me to speak on this, we have Shadrach Kundi. He is an international security analyst, African Center for International Affairs in Accra, Ghana. Thank you so much, Shadrach, for your time.
Thank you very much for having me on the show.
Thank you for joining us.
Greetings to your listeners.
It's a pleasure. Now, let's begin with policy and scale. The U.S. has also, we know that the U.S. has also carried out, mass expulsions to Panama and is also expanding removals, right? So how do you read Washington's decision to start sending these migrants to third countries? Let's start with the basics first.
So in terms of policy, they are seeking to promote their own national policy or foreign policy goal by ensuring that undocumented migrants who are within their countries are moved or are taken to countries in which they belong. But they have faced a challenge in the sense that some countries have decided not to receive nationals of their own. And as a result, they will have to repatriate or export them to different countries for which, when they arrive, they may be able to find their way out. And for a country like Ghana, this is not the first time that we're experiencing that. We had a situation where the then president, this current president, he was in power some few years ago, and he admitted some few group of people from the Guantanamo Bay. So this didn't come as a surprise to Ghanaians, but there is a whole national field on issues regarding to migration currently, even across the whole world. And I think it's the world going on a rightist perspective in the sense that conservative politics is taking center stage within the policy framing of how people should move. And there is also the growing tension about what foreigners do in countries and also the whole globalization speed that has engulfed the world in the sense that people are able to move freely. And now movement has become seamless as a result of the advancement of technology and how technology facilitates all of this. But for people of African descent, it's like Africa has become a dumping site. Ghana is not the only country that has received migrants. We've experienced some in Eswatini, some in South Sudan, and the whole Rwandan issue with the United Kingdom. And Europe is also having talks of following suit. So if Africans are welcoming in terms of welcoming other nationals from other places, it creates it opens the floodgate for more people or for more developed countries to see Africa as a dumping site, for which it is not.
Okay. Now, still speaking on, the 14 West Africans that were flown in this week, and helped to their home state. Reports also say that, the U.S. may carry out some third, country removals with as little as 6 hours notice. So if this is true, what does this mean for some of the legal safeguards?
It will depend on which nationals per se, because the president's briefing with the media, where a question like that was posed, the rationale behind it was that these were people who were West African descent. in the sense that within the West African region, per the ECOWAS protocol on the movement of people and goods, you do not need a visa to come to Ghana if you are a Nigerian or you're a West African citizen. So it will depend on the nationality, and it will depend on the group of people who are being repatriated to Ghana. And these nuances will define whether Ghana would accept or not which national comes into the country with a lot of security checks in order not to jeopardize the interest of Ghanaians, because there is already a national conversation about foreign nationals who are doing retailing in Ghana, and it's a big issue. So Ghanaians have their eyes on these particular issues, and I think it will take a lot of retrospective and also legal safeguards by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who are being the backbone of Ghana in terms of undertaking these activities.
But what is this, compatible with refugee and human rights protections internationally?
In terms of human rights, we cannot speak for it, especially for the United States of America, in the sense that there has been growing and already conversation about human rights safeguards, especially for people who are expelled or migrants who are being repatriated to countries in which they do not know anyone, they've never been there before. And also considering the fact that maybe in those countries that they are being repatriated to, their rights may not be protected. There is no safeguard or guarantees to that. But, states do have responsibility. And under circumstances where a state fails in terms of negligence to protect the interest of foreign nationals, the state has the obligation to take remedies in terms of the third party whose national has been injured. And as a result, it will create the safeguards for human rights, but it is not solely assured. And from the onset, the issue of expelling people from the United States of America to nations in which they are not nationals, it's a human rights issue in itself.
All right. Now, there are cuts, we're still talking about human rights, by the way. Human Rights Watch has actually documented 299 people expelled in Panama earlier, right, this year. And they say that it's due to, says due process was denied. And this was the reason why I actually asked that question earlier. So if that is the case, what precedents does this set?
It sets a huge precedence in the sense that under certain circumstances, some states may decide not to admit nationals. It's usually the United States of America has used this tool of trade and the likes as means towards whipping other nations in line. And from the statements of President Mahama, you could read that it was as a result of some level of concessions being made. And as a result, that was what made it possible for these 14 nationals to be brought to Ghana. And later on, some of them have found their way to their respective countries. But in the sense where a state feels or a state that does not see any need or agency to admit nationals, they have that right to take that decision because they are sovereign in that light.
All right. Now let's quickly link up with our second guest. That's Odelia Ntiamoah. She is a PhD student and lecturer in media relations, University of Professional Studies in Accra, Ghana. If you can hear me, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, too.
It's a pleasure. Well, Odelia, we'd love to hear your thoughts, on all of this as well. And we're talking about human rights just before you came in. There are court challenges and NGO pushes for, written notice and opportunity to challenge some of these removals from the U.S. to third world countries. How strong are those legal remedies in practice?
What I'd like to say is that I listened to our president from yesterday's press conference, and the indications he was giving and the processes that he will be taking those that are being repatriated does not flout for me ECOWAS regulations or one, getting them to come to Ghana in the first place, and then connecting with their embassies to move them out of Ghana to their various countries. So, for example, he indicated how the majority come from Nigeria, and the fact that once they hit the ground, almost all of them decided going back to Nigeria is the right thing to do. We look at it from a human rights perspective, which I am not a human rights lawyer. It's a decision that has been made by the state, and they are going ahead with their decision. I think the methodology of the way people are handled, handcuffed with chains on their legs, amongst others, is quite inhumane, and it gives the U.S. a very bad publicity. And for me, being a branding person, it's not a good brand for a nation that has pushed human rights, pushed issues relating to democracy, and pushed support for various nations across the globe. And so from the U.S. perspective, I think that one of the key things they need to be able to do and do well is how the communication, how the whole process is done in an inhumane way. From the perspective of receiving countries, so like from Ghana, I like the fact that the president has come to explain the processes. So for example, there was a Gambian national whose embassy has been contacted, and we're looking at how to repatriate him back to Gambia in a lawful and structured way. For me, I think going through these legal processes positions our nation as being humane. The fact that our president has spoken about it and all of that. It looks bad from the US side, but once it comes into our nation, how we structure the reception and, of course, the later way of sending them back to their country is very critical for the foreign policy of our nation as well, because we have signed on to various protocols as ECOWAS, as African Union. We're looking at issues of merging our borders in such a way that we are able to trade amongst ourselves. And so anything that goes contrary to some of these protocols goes against a lot of different protocols that we have signed on in Africa here as well.
All right, but then, Odelia, how likely is it that, these transfers will exacerbate xenophobic or even anti-migrant sentiment locally, particularly in places already experiencing protests about migrants? And we did know that, a few months ago, yes, there was an anti-migrant protest in Ghana as well.
Currently, it is already happening. So whether it is even these deportations or not, these things are already happening. Recently, I reported in a Ghanaian community that is dominated by Nigerian retail marketers, and the fact that the retail market, for example, is for locals, and I have been dominated by Nigerians and various protests. I think the onus lies on our leaders, one, to make the youth especially get a lot of jobs. Job creation is actually the main reason for a lot of these xenophobic attacks. And so job creation is critical. The economy in general is something that needs to be worked upon. And of course, the fact that we have signed on to protocols that opens our borders up for other nationals to join our nation is a stage where we as citizens should begin to also accept and also understand. And so for me, these are the ways that we as a nation should be solving some of these issues. You obviously see that based on what President Mahama indicated in the press conference, it doesn't look like a transition to come and stay, a transition to receive and then later repatriate to their various nations. To come and stay, yes, we have our own challenges as Ghanaians, and definitely you will find the protests coming up once people see that we have created a conducive atmosphere for non-Ghanaians while they as citizens continue to have challenges. There are a couple of youth-centered projects that are going on to really get the youth engaged. But I say that it's not enough. It's not huge enough. It goes beyond just even creating jobs to curriculum that is in schools, that when people are finished with school, how do they become useful to society with what they have studied, amongst other things. So it's a multifaceted issue that needs to be, to have a multidimensional approach.
Okay. Now let's have your final thoughts, Shadrach. Hello, Shadrach, can you hear me? Can you unmute? Hello, Shadrach, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, I can hear you now. Please go ahead and unmute.
Yes,
go ahead with your final thoughts.
All right. So, as I mentioned earlier, the decision of Ghana to receive other nationals of West African states is not out of place in accordance with Article 40 of the Ghanaian Constitution, and also not out of place in accordance with the ECOWAS Protocol on Free Movement of Persons and Goods. But permit me to add that the issue of migration sentiments of Ghanaians, it's only within the space of Ghanaian laws, in which those laws have not received that much attention. When you read the GIPC law, when you read Article Section 27 of it, it copiously gives certain areas or certain trade in which are not supposed to be engaged by foreign nationals, not specifically Nigerians. So for me, Ghana is in the right tangent of receiving foreign nationals of other states within the West African scope. And the issue of we having migration sentiments, especially against Nigerians, is only within the proper space of law for our political elites to also do the right thing, so that nationals will also follow in line with what Ghana has stood for in accordance with Article 40 of the Ghanaian Constitution.
All right. So let's have your final thoughts as well, Odelia. I really wish you joined us earlier so we could speak more on this. But in just 30 seconds, let's hear from you.
Yeah. What I would like to say is that I think this has become a point where almost everybody in Africa or in developing countries that are receiving nationals from the US have become nervous. I think it actually indicates how cracked our own societies are when it comes to job creation, when it comes to the comforts that people have in their own nations.
Yeah.
Once we are able to deal with job creation for our people and receive and repatriate, for me, I don't see this as a bad thing if it's within the confines of our laws. And then, of course,
so sorry, Odelia, we actually cannot take any more. Time is not on our side. But thank you so much, gentleman and lady, for joining us at this time. Odelia and Shadrach, we appreciate you.